It was probably one of the most surreal moments in my career. I went on patrol and all the people that had been hiding in the jungles and out in the hills for years were coming out with their registration papers in their hands and walking to the polling booths to register their vote. There was a lot of happiness at that time, but as history shows, that straight after that, mayhem erupted.
People had just evacuated. They were either on the foreshore or they'd gone into the hills. Many people had just taken off into the hills.
There was very little we could do. I think it was preordained what was going to happen here.
We knew that the East Timorese had sought a referendum, they'd won that, then the militia tried to take it away from them. The whole international community said, no, that's not right.
This is a courageous decision. It's an essential decision, by the way, that a UN force goes in and assists the people of East Timor.
Coming to terms with all those memories, and they're in my head constantly. And we were trained to go over to Timor, but coming back was harder.
Right, we on? Rightio, g'day everyone. Today's date is the 23rd of December 2001, and this is just the first stage of my documentary on East Timor.
It's polarising because it was the worst deployment, but it was the best deployment. Worst, obviously, because one of our close mates died. But what that forged out of that was a unit that I've never seen such a tight bond before, ever.
225 on the tree.
We were a peacekeeping mission in an engagement with a militia force who was there to threaten the security and stability of a small part of Timor.
It was an intense period of operations after Len died. A person killed in action hadn't happened since the Vietnam War.
24-year-old Leonard Manning was destined for higher things in the military. Popular, a crack shot with a pistol. And on his first overseas deployment, Manning was in Bravo Company's 6th Platoon. Its commander was Nick Marfell. Manning had been recommended for a promotion just days before he headed out on what was to be his last ever patrol.
I guess when Aaron first mooted the idea of going back to Timor to me, I did think long and hard about it.
Nani?
Yes.
Aaron.
Elvin?
Yes, Aaron. Yeah.
I've got stuff in my head that I can visualise very clearly of that day, so I want to try and change that picture if I can to a more serene setting with friends around me.
And Army is your group, your own special group.
Soul Brothers. Sammy, say to the camera.
Yeah. Soul Patrol.
The boys called us the Soul Patrol because all of us were very coloured, and we fitted in, very well. Yeah.
Do you think you were chosen for that reason?
I think we were. Yeah.
Tell me about your reason for coming here on this trip.
Well, obviously to see Simone and Teresina, see how the village is doing, the old place, because you don't know when people, pass away, you may miss the opportunity.
This is Private Heather's, otherwise known as Mud's bed space. It's pretty tidy and almost immaculate. and that's known as the monk's space.
From a young age, from about 15, 16, all I wanted to do was go on ops. You know, my whole reasoning for joining was for kudos, you know, prestige. I wanted my photo up on the mantelpiece, and I wanted medals on my chest. I wanted to see what the difference was. I guess that's my main reason for being here. Yeah, nothing better than seeing it with your own eyes.
We're out of teams now, firing down a few rounds. That there's our medic.
I was the medic attached to a group of 30-ish soldiers. The first trip I was the only female out of the whole company. I wouldn't see other females for months at a time, I didn't know that. I basically want to see if we'd actually done good or not, which I know sounds silly, but some places you're not sure. You know, some places you think, oh, are we doing the right thing?
I'm pretty nervous, to be honest. Pretty nervous. It's been a big part of my life, although that was just 15 kind of minutes of madness up that hill when we got ambushed. But it's affected me my whole life, the rest of my life since then. I don't feel alone. This holds the Mariora or the life force of all our friends back here, that new land. They physically can't be there, but the stone represents that, them being there.
It's a great opportunity 25 years later to reflect on what has occurred, the difference it's made, and those of us who were involved in it and have still carried on in other theatres elsewhere. It will be an awakening.
We train really well to go over, but we don't train so well to come back. So it's going to be a little bit different, and patrolling through the jungle looking for sign. But once, I guess I don't think it'll hit me until I see that cross. It'll hit me.
And now, 25 years after their peacekeeping mission, the New Zealand military are heading back to East Timor.
The New Zealand Defence Force first went to the Southeast Asian island in 1999, hoping it will give insight into the veterans who were unable to go back.
Because I know that a lot of the veterans who have gone over there will be wondering what it looks like today. So this is Dili City.
After their arrival in Dili, it was quickly determined the best place for the New Zealanders to be deployed was here in Souai. Close to the West Timor border, there had been frequent attacks by militia who were terrorising the local population and killing hundreds.
Just as a note, the temperature today's about 35 degrees, which isn't too bad. The other day, about 2 days ago, apparently it was about 50 degrees plus. So.
The heat was probably my first memory. As soon as I walked off the plane, I thought it was the engine that was hot. And further away I got from the plane, it was actually just the heat. And I thought, bugger this.
Obviously we had a job to do when we came into the village, gather information, and the best way to do that is by immersing yourself with the locals. In the mornings before the heat came up, we'd be working with the village to clear the bush away from the main roads. The whole village came together and did that as a morning task. And then everyone would split off to go and work in their plantations and things like that.
We were having a great time. We were having fun. It was like we were on a hiking trip.
Yeah, just many different landscapes around the area. Here we have a bit of a forest. Here we have a desert.
TNI. We just walked right underneath them.
Kiwi troops had to keep an eye on a hotspot, the troublesome border with West Timor, patrolled by the Indonesian military, known as the TNI.
We came very prepared for what we didn't know, and there was a lot of the didn't know in terms of what the intent was, particularly from the Indonesians from our perspective, because they had ships around us.
A couple of weeks ago the TNI were down here with some locals, and the locals on this side were pointing at militia, and then TNI actually formed a barricade around the militia to protect them. I think it was a bit of a standoff, I wasn't too sure. The in-state, they never caught the militia.
Many suspected the TNI was working with the militia, who slipped through the border from West Timor to destabilise the newly independent country.
At the moment there's a TNI patrol, Indonesian patrol coming towards us. We're going to be trying, I think we're going to try and have a yarn to them. He's a bit dodgy. Yes. As you can see, all these streets up here, most of the houses have been ransacked. All these buildings were ripped down by the militia, burnt to the ground. So we've got no roofs, so all the iron was looted and taken to West Timor.
Like 245 people died in this church. And my biggest memory of being here was we came up one day to pay our respects, and there was an elderly lady here who, Timorese lady, came over to me, and I was in full uniform with my rifle on my back, and took my hand, and she was like, "Oh, thank you, thank you." And I just remember feeling so like I hadn't done anything, you know. I just turned up and I did my job.
At the moment, there's not a hell of what we can do because we haven't got an interpreter, so we can't really talk to the locals. But however, we just come here and they see us, so it makes them feel a bit happier. Hey, Macy.
In some ways, coming from the Pacific Islands, you know, I felt at home. You know, once the ice was broken and we started, you know, to get involved with the locals and especially next door, Simone and his wife and their family, once we were settled, that was us.
We got really involved in the village and supporting the teachers through getting stuff sent back from New Zealand and stationery and school supplies, and even some of our guys ran English lessons here. And I just think we, as Kiwis, we have a natural compulsion to try and do a little bit more.
We played a game of football today on a pitch at a school between a church where a massacre occurred in 1999 and another church on the other side where a massacre occurred in 1999. Nothing but fun, laughter, bit of skullduggery on the football pitch occurred.
What makes New Zealand military pretty special around the world is our ability to take a little bit of time to build some relationships.
Well, none of us could have ever dreamed that was going to happen 25 years ago.
What a great day. Only Kiwis do that sort of stuff in my experience.
Yep, I keep in contact with Simone. You know, poverty is quite ripe down here, so they're pretty poor down here. The last time we were here, they had no clothes for kids and things like that.
Otário, Simone! Hey!
You know, if you go to the other villages, each chief or each village has their own group of Kiwis in there. You know, that group that hung out in their village, that group that played with the kids, that stayed there overnight, drank all their coffee. Yeah, there's always a story in each village.
Another photo?
And this was taken on the last trip here in 2015. The last time I came here was 2015. This is for you and Teresina? For all your family, yeah? Yeah, so it's for you guys, yeah? Yeah? Oh, hey, you're too bot, man, too bot. Hey. Yeah, so this is when we first came into the village. This is where we stayed. Lived out of this location. The houses next to us were empty, so there was no one down here except for Simone.
Where I'm standing at the moment is the border itself. The sign that tells you that you're now in West Timor.
Patrols faced a virtually impossible task of monitoring border crossings.
Because the border was porous, people could walk across it, literally. There's no border controls or anything like that.
The border ain't well marked. As you can see, there's a couple of waitars, a bit of paint on it. That's the only way you can tell the border physically. Apart from physically, is if bullets fly back at you, which we haven't had so far. Not yet, anyway.
I guess at the start, it was sort of a peacekeeping type operation. After Leonard Manning got killed, it quickly changed.
The death of Private Leonard Manning was a pivotal moment for the New Zealand deployment. Their rules of engagement changed to better deal with the increased threat the militia posed to them and the public. They went from peacekeepers to peacemakers.
There was a more aggressive stance to reduce any likelihood of casualties.
And the instant that happened, it hit home that what we were doing was actually real and potentially, dangerous.
We realised that this was not just your run-of-the-mill West Timorese militia, that there was something more different about it because of the ordnance they had used and the way they had conducted themselves during that particular contact with Nick's platoon.
Actually doing what it is that you were trained to do. Yeah, it was sad, and at the same time, exciting.
Quite nice to know that we've got a bit more stopping power to the shit in the bed.
We actually were in the jungle with cam paint trying to stay hidden.
When Manning was killed, there was a decision made to bring the SAS back to do some tracking.
First time they landed, I was expecting these massive Greek gods to jump out of the helicopter. That didn't happen. All these older type dudes jumped out. Some of them looked 50, 60, and I was like, oh hell, is that our SAS?
We'd been ready to go since Vietnam.
We were a bit shocked how young they all looked.
But hey, never judge a book by its cover, man.
When we first got into country, the morale was low. The reason why we were there was for Private Manning.
Yeah, I think the militia were pretty bold to start with.
Our job as Special Forces is to do those things that others can't. So we can't do what an infantry battalion can do in terms of maintaining a permanent presence in a location. But what we can do is be impact players.
We tracked that a couple of times with the squadron, the sign.
SAS specialist trackers were flown in, their job to find the routes the militia used. Once they were established, the infantry would take over setting blocks, a roundabout way of saying ambushes.
We're there as combat trackers. We're not there to do ambushing.
6 o'clock this morning, we'll get up on the chopper pad, so we're going to be going out with the squadron, and we'll just give them security as they track.
We attached a platoon of infantry behind us. That was our support. If we did engage them or catch up to them, then we could just go to ground and infantry would take over. So
Traps were set near riverbeds where militia would often cross, so they couldn't be tracked so easily.
We had critical markers from the track, their boot prints. They had a different pattern, and we tracked all their movements through the whole way out. And that just gave us so much information.
That led to the numbers, the direction, the age mainly of the group.
So we knew that they would travel at night. They were going through our AO to do something in another AO. And we were ready for them when they decided to come back through.
SAS trackers would identify the direction of sign, and we'd go and leap forward and put in blocking positions on the most likely approaches.
And sitting in ambushes for, geez, weeks, if not months on end.
And they ran into the infantry battalion. They got hit 3 times on the way back.
Can't catch a fish if you don't have a hook in the water.
And it's all over.
White tile area, and this is where all the headquarters elements stay over here.
But that's where Jimmy used to do our TQ reports, in here, falling asleep, drinking magic coffee.
Oh, that's what we call White Tyler. 5-star hotel, so you can get a share. Look at that.
These are the huts. They're built here on bats. What bat, Joe? You know? Bat 3?
3, yeah.
Bat 3.
Start on bat 3.
This building here is the Portuguese used to use it. It dates back to the 1600s, I think.
Here we are at JPE.
Still got the boys' names up here, obviously Davis, Scotty on the other side.
This is all the sleeping arrangement.
We had an 11-year-old that came and had malaria, and it had gone to his brain and he was seizing, and we tried to resuscitate him here. Yeah, wasn't good.
I turned up as a naive little 21-year-old. You know, I knew about the Geneva Conventions. I knew we'd be wearing a Red Cross, so I thought that meant we'd be like stretcher bearers and medics and padres in the First and Second World War. I thought that meant that we'd be unarmed, treating people, but not being a combatant.
We've been wrecked. They've given us a gun because intelligence was dead set certain that we were going to get contacted within 48 hours.
We had unfortunately run out of water, so we'd sent 2 guys down to the river to fill up our water bottles, and while they were down there we heard the next platoon over start shooting on the gun, and our 2 guys came back terrified because they didn't know what the shooting was about either, and they'd been in the riverbank. Yeah. So the next platoon over from us had shot and killed a militia.
You don't see a lot of the walking around stuff. You've seen a lot of the funny sort of stuff, but there's another side out here as well, now and again.
At the same time the hunt was on for the militia responsible for Manning's death, New Zealand forces had to concentrate on other urgent missions. One involved flying helicopters across the border into Indonesian territory to pick up East Timorese injured in attacks.
And so the refugees in West Timor, there was militia in West Timor, and the refugees took some revenge and they killed one of the militia leaders. And then the following day, on the 6th of September, the militia were going pretty wild, and they broke into the UNHCR compound in Atambua, killed 3 people in there, injured a whole lot of others. The Indonesian army, the TNI, were able to kind of round them up, and they requested that we come and pick them up. So the mission was
across the border.
Yeah, so the mission was essentially go across the border into West Timor.
Indonesian militia were at the pickup point, a site run by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. Kiwi SAS aboard the chopper were wary.
We did a circle, had a look around, could see the TNI down there, could see a landing field where we landed. I had to put cynical, paranoid hat on, which was my job, right? Why are we doing this? Why don't the TNI just drive them to 20 k's to the border, was in my head. Was there some skullduggery about to happen?
There was a few of them, and on my helicopter I actually took all the injured ones, so some could walk in wounded, some were having to be carried. A mixture of, they're all in shock obviously, and sort of from that, I've seen their colleagues being killed.
This was the house on the 23rd, the day before the contact, where the locals, a couple of locals came up to us in the afternoon, told us that they'd seen militia down the road further towards the 799 feature.
Feature 799 is locally known as Foho Debelulik, a jungle-clad hill close to the border, regularly used by pro-Indonesian militia, the site where Leonard Manning's section was ambushed and he was fatally shot.
I think the atmosphere within the group was one of anger, and so the boys wanted to get out there and get these fellas.
When I found out that Len was the one that was at that time missing, it was a significant blow. And that's not to say that losing any of your soldiers is not going to be a significant blow. It was just because Len was so clear in our mind, having just discussed his potential a matter of 48 hours before.
Rightio, this is Bravo track, we're on now, and it just runs basically west, down a slope there and down to the river, and that's the border down there. Okay, so this is one of the major infill routes that the militia have been using. The feeling wasn't too bad, we still weren't too concerned. We'd heard them in front of us, but at that stage, because no one had any contacts or anything, we sort of all presumed that we'd come across them and they'd put their hands up and that sort of shit. But as we found out the following day, that wasn't to be. So from there, we headed up the top towards the crest of the hill, dropped down just below the crest of the hill, keep following the sign, so the crest is on our right hand shoulder. First shot was fired and then bang.
Nothing can compare to that camaraderie that we got from living through that shared experience, and it was tough. It was really tough. It was an intense period of operations after Len died.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it all the better to come back with people that you know have a similar view of that particular situation to you.
A couple of things I'll take up the hill with me that mean quite a bit. A UN flag that was signed by our platoon, our section mascot, and Len's watch. That when he was stripped of all his weaponry and webbing and med kit and everything, he had his sleeves rolled down and they missed his watch. So that was returned to the family, who was allowing me to wear it tomorrow up the hill. So that's going to mean quite a bit as well. It's just got to be done. You'd do it for me. I guess most of us struggled in one way or another, dealing with it. I was too focused for 10 years, bouncing from operation to operation to even comprehend the enormity of it. There was a lot more vegetation, I remember, in certain areas, and this is probably about where I was, I guess.
We're patrolling along. Pretty much in direction there. Single file.
So you would have been prime for these guys?
Yeah, so Phil obviously walked past him, alerted him. Unfortunately, next in line was Len.
Straight through there is one of the firing points. Another one, you can make out a person up through this, and again to the right, towards that behind the rocks up there.
Hit him with his first shot.
Yeah.
You reckon?
Yeah.
I reckon.
And they were just shooting down.
So no wonder you were getting your hair parted down there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Not a lot of places on the way down.
I would have just dived under around here somewhere.
And then went.
And then just stayed there for what seemed an eternity. Remember seeing all the trees, branches around my head just getting pinged off left, right and centre, and knowing that I'd had to get up to that in a minute and turn my back to it and hope for the best. There was no assaulting them. It was just they had the total upper hand. 4 or 5, 6 firing positions, all shooting really aggressively towards mostly me, I guess. And to the point where I remember one guy, the closest guy, I could hear him, he'd run out of rounds of his magazine and he'd start reloading. He was that close, I could hear it.
At this stage there's quite a bit of fire going on.
Boom, 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 boom.
We all married up at a point, about 60 metres down there. At that stage, everyone was there apart from Len. I asked Cheetah where he was, and he said, I think he's dead. That's about it, really.
We stand here today to recognise not only his sacrifice but those of others in the drive to establish the foundation for what is now the free country of Timor-Leste.
Port is a ceremonial drink that we use in the to toast in the military.
Onward. Till then.
The aftermath of the contact, one guy was shot in the arm, 2 guys still missing, and the rest of them are probably safe and sound back in West Timor. Len himself, despite a few reports in newspapers, whatever, he was only shot once through the head, and that's the probably the first or second shot. I'd say the first shot that killed him.
I didn't have time to grieve. I really didn't. I remember getting home from that 6-month tour and just being incredibly tired. Didn't have a lot of sleep for 6 months. Living on nervous energy for a long, long time. Yeah, because I've got images in my head of what was going on up here, and it wasn't too pretty. I keep finding myself looking up here. But now that I'm here, it's quite peaceful. I'm glad I had to make it up the top. It was a must for me. I've got a different view on this hill now. It's what I needed. In the centre, our Punamu stone. So that symbolises all that can't travel physically with us. They're here with us in spirit. Yeah, I'm surprised at how I'm reacting, to be honest. I thought it'd be a mess, because I have been a bit of a mess leading up to this. Looking at Len's photo at Kiwi House in Dili, that kind of set me off a bit. Just a really good guy. And yeah, I think if anything, I was just say sorry. He had all his life ahead of him, probably a brilliant army career. But yeah, he never made it. Just prior to the first shot ringing out, I changed the order of march around, so I would have been standing where he was. It's always played on my mind. Yeah.
You feel at peace now?
I don't think I'll ever be at peace, to be honest, mate. But it's helping, yeah. It really is. It really is helping. Placing a cross is always a difficult task. On the one hand, we want to remember this site, and on the other hand, we would like to be able to forget it. And there's something about the place itself. On the one hand, this is a holy place. The last place Private Leonard Manning was amongst his friends. And on the other hand, it's a hated place, a place that now bears the scars of violence and evil.
When we left to go to Timor, I said, I'm going to bring you all home. And I sometimes regret saying that because I didn't bring everybody home, but then my old man, who was a Vietnam vet, said to me, he says, you did bring everybody home, you just didn't come back all together.
Leonard Manning's body was retrieved later the same day he was shot. A memorial was erected to Private Manning in the Tillamar Cemetery. He was buried with full military honours in the Rangiruru lawn.
Not everybody was in the same area, but everyone knew about the accidents that did happen over there and the killing of Private Manning.
So it was, I guess, big news back home. I was still in Timor, obviously, but my father would send me newspaper clippings and various articles about what was going on, and a lot of it was negative. A lot of it was quite hard to deal with, to be honest. It beats you down after a while.
We weren't sitting around waiting, wasting time. We were sitting around to get the necessary resources in place to make a concerted effort to go and find Len and get him home no matter what situation was presented with us when he got there. Our drive wasn't to seek revenge and retribution. Our drive was to get Len back into our care.
I hope that they understand that peacekeeping doesn't always mean it's an easy trip, and that the veterans that served in East Timor are veterans and deserve the same recognition as anybody else.
But the acknowledgement of our servicemen and women is still not as it should be. We're very good at commemorating the dead. We're not so good at commemorating those that are currently serving and have served and are still alive. We're not going to be like, in the US, thank you for your service to everyone in uniform, but we need to actually acknowledge that these people were different. They went off at the government's call and they made a difference.
I don't know, I kind of sometimes think it was for nothing. But now that I come back here, I don't know, it's actually, it's good.
When we came years ago, the children all had conjunctivitis, their hair was matted, they were skinny, they had scabs all over their legs. They were all tired and scared, and now they look so good, yeah.
Do you feel that you did the right thing here?
Yes, and everywhere we go, people are happy to see us. They when you say New Zealand, they instantly remember and say thank you. It's amazing. Yeah, I think New Zealand should be proud of what we did. I think New Zealand as a country should be proud that we've helped them.
Without the intervention and the threat of it, it would have continued, and there would have been even more, atrocities committed.
And people are just getting on with their lives where they didn't have that opportunity if we didn't come in, and perhaps if Len hadn't made the ultimate sacrifice. I wish it hadn't happened. I really do, but it did happen. Seeing the people here, that helps.
The memory of Leonard Manning lives on. A firing range bears his name, as well as a pistol shooting award. His family funded an educational scholarship for promising young Timorese students.
In 2002, I got scholarship from Manning family. Today, I work as a teacher and then as a headmaster at this school. But again, I have to thanks to Manning family because from their support, now I am a headmaster.
Ok, boa tarde e obrigada. Tempo mesmo mais soro ao Senhor Sira, eu sempre orgulho, no contente tebes e ao solo tebes o ser minha presença e danel, o de how bele a soro malu filafali o Sira, o sente a solo o ser minha presença e da balorai manek e danel.
I have had direct personal connection with New Zealanders who are here, when New Zealand was deployed here. The soldiers, New Zealand soldiers, were incredibly professional, disciplined.
I'd love to bring my kids back here and show them this place. I'd never take them to Afghanistan. Jeez. Day one, walking off that plane without a weapon in my hand, without cam on my face, without body armour on, and just actually sit down, have a beer with these fellas like yesterday was cold. And I thought, man, who would have thought one day we'd be just sitting on the beach.
You know, to see kids laughing away, holding hands, you know, walking down the road, you know, families are happy. And, you know, you get the old kia ora, you know, these kids here are a bit younger, but the older guys still remember that.
What Timor-Leste, or East Timor as we call it, has done now, has achieved in that time is amazing.
We are not very good at managing our economy, but as a democracy, it functions very well. At press freedom, we are rated even better than New Zealand, and better than Australia, better than US.
It's on a trajectory which I think we can be very, very proud of, not only as a military or as even just a small group of men and women that were here for a period of time, but you know, the nation put a lot of time and effort into getting Timor where it is today, and I think we can all be proud of that.
Yeah, hope you enjoyed the video.
See you when you get back to NZ, okay? Catch you later.
I was running back when I heard him call, and as I turned, I watched him fall. His body froze in disbelief, and it fell to the earth like a fallen leaf. And I lay my hand upon his brow, and it felt so cold, and I wondered how. And he stared at me through faded eyes. This is how a young man died.